Before we dive into today's episode, Stu and I want to take a moment to wish all our listeners a Happy New Year. Your ongoing support means the world to us, and it's what drives us to bring you a second season starting in February. Now, let's get into it. We're thrilled to have Rob Ashton on the show today. Rob is the Director of Rugby at Bedford Tigers, a club with big dreams of advancing to Championship 1 and beyond. He shares his honest insights on what we need to do as a sport to move forward, offering fresh and innovative ideas. In addition to his role at the Bedford Tigers, Rob is also the head coach of Cambridge University Rugby League and is actively working to develop women's rugby league in Scotland. He also offers his perspective on international rugby league and some ideas on how we can improve the game globally. We hope you enjoy this episode. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got Rob Ashton on the show this week. It's been a long time coming after I basically dogged it due to work commitments last week. So thanks for still agreeing to come on the show, Rob.
Yeah, cheers for having me, guys.
Absolutely. And Stu, this is our last show of the year, even though it'll come out sort of probably early next year. Then we'll take a small break, but we hopefully continue next year. But you got anything on for the Christmas period?
Yeah, so I've got a bit of time off between Christmas and New Year, and happy that this is our Christmas special with Rob. Rob will have a chat about all the good things you're doing in the UK at the moment and previously later on. But I just wanted to firstly, if you could tell us a bit about yourself and how you got into rugby league.
Okay, so where I am is a rugby union hotbed, heartland, whatever. I'm about 1 million miles from anywhere that's got anything to do with rugby league. There just happened to be an expat northerner and an Australian guy who were running a rugby league side for something to do for rugby union players in the summer back in 2004. I think the club actually started in the late 90s, but it was under the name of a rugby union club. So it was a rugby union club, a low-level rugby union club was playing rugby league in the summer. Then this expat northerner and the Australian guy and somebody else sort of came in and rebranded it as Bedford Tigers, and that was in 2004. So we've just celebrated 20 years. I picked it up by accident. One of my mates played for them, and just sort of, we'd been out on a night out the night before, and he'd stayed over and got up, and he just got one of those standard messages, we're short of players. Do you know anybody? And he said, "Oh, Rob, do you want to come along and play?" And I was like, "Well, I've watched Wigan on TV. Sure, I've got this, right?" So I went along, and they were teaching me the rules on the way down, and we got down there, and obviously I messed up because, there was way too much rugby union instilled in me at the time. But I fucking loved it. Like I've said before, it was everything that I was looking for in a rugby union match, and it was just there in a rugby league match. So, over the course of time, I was playing both, and, I was sort of, because it was so entrenched in me to grow up and play rugby union, and follow rugby union, as it is for most people in the UK, I was sort of, oh yeah, I'm a rugby player, but when I was saying that, I meant rugby union. But then, I'd play rugby league in the summer, and then something just switched a couple of years in, and I thought, you know what? Why am I putting this sport down? Because it's so good, and it was everything. Like I say, it was everything that I was looking for. So there was like a light bulb moment, and just slowly started to wind down what I was doing in rugby union. I was still doing it because all my mates were playing it, but I was getting way more enjoyment out of rugby league. So slowly I switched over, and, my rugby union playing just almost stopped. I'd still play the odd game just because there's 5 union clubs in our town. So it's everywhere. And, mates were at different clubs, and they were saying, "Oh, can you come along and play for us this season?" So I played the odd game here or there, but my heart and soul was into the rugby league stuff. So, I moved over and I started playing that more permanently, even though our season was considerably shorter. And then there was sort of this shift in the RFL. We lost our development officers around about 2012 through Sport England funding, or Sport England funding cuts. But I wanted to carry on playing, and all I could see was my club was going to cease existing. So it was like, right, I've got to do something here. So it wasn't just keep a club running so that I could keep playing rugby league. It was, I've got to keep a competition running so that I can play rugby league, because there's no point in me having a club but nobody to play against. So there was a lot of networking as a relatively young man, sort of with no experience. I went to school, went to uni, joined the fire service. I've got no background in networking within sports. So it was almost like a standing start. And I reached out to all these clubs because I kind of picked up a few contacts here and there from people that you play against semi-regularly. So you recognize who the main guys are at the other clubs. And I sort of reached out to them. And this is all, I wouldn't say it's before social network, but it was around about 2000. Well, yeah, it's 2012 when social networking was starting to get big, and I could reach out and I could find these people fairly easily. And I just sort of said, look, put a proposal to all these clubs. Let's just, as a group of clubs who are based in the east of England, let's just agree that we are going to build a competition together. And fair play to them, they all bought in. There was a couple who sort of stayed playing in London because that was just the established competition at the time. But over time, they all started to come out, and we had this nucleus of clubs. And I think at its peak, we had 11 or 12 clubs playing in this East competition, which was ridiculous because when the development officers left, there were 5 clubs. So, but we just created something as a group of individuals and club administrators, which was appealing, and it was stable. And I think that was the main thing, is that you knew from the final whistle of one season who was in what league the next season, and that had never been the case. It was always, right, let's have a reshuffle. And the fixtures had come out in March, and you started playing at the end of April, and there was just no real organisation there. So I'd always sort of said, look, we'll get fixtures out in December or January so that you can really plan your seasons and bring boys in and just take the guesswork out of a lot of what was going on. So yeah, we built that up, and we've had a stable Eastern competition for about 14 years. Cup competition run every year. Two levels, because we've had Premier, Division 1, we've had Merit Leagues, reserve grade sides are playing in that competition as well. The Southern Conference League came along at one point, and I think it needed to happen because we ended up with about 3 or 4 very dominant sides, and nobody else was sort of able to break into that group. So those moved off and merged with whoever else was sort of cream of the crop in the South. But what that did was that allowed those teams that were sort of 4th and 5th to then become 1 and 2. So then they were having success, and then it allowed other teams underneath them to grow. And it just grew pretty organically over that 14-year period into something that's been able to really sustain clubs, and that they've been able to grow and operate within. And off the back of that, we've had a women's competition running in the East for about 2 or 3 years. I mean, it's fledgling, so it's like 9-a-side festivals, but it's still tangible competition. We've got 3 clubs play wheelchair in that area. So yeah, my involvement in the East Rugby League has been, to grow this pocket of clubs that is able to generate all the activity that is being pushed in rugby league in the UK at the minute. So.
Yeah, I love that. This is purely a curiosity question because it's such success. How old were you when you started administering this kind of stuff as an official?
How old was I? 29.
That's pretty young. Usually the administrators sort of that we have on the show, with all due respect to all of our fabulous guests, are a little bit older. So yeah, well done. Because
it was driven by me wanting to play the sport, and all I could see was if I don't do it, nobody's doing it. So I'm just going to not play the sport.
You've somewhat touched on this already, but I'll ask the question anyway. So just for our listeners, you've been the director of rugby at the Bedford Tigers for a number of years now. What have been the challenges and highlights of developing a rugby league club outside of the traditional UK heartlands?
The challenges is definitely rugby union. It's just one of those things that we've just got to accept that exists.
It's not a bad sport. It's just not.
No, I'm not saying it's a bad sport. I'm saying it's a challenge that we have to accept.
Okay.
I'm not saying rugby union. We have to accept that exists. No, I can see how that sounds. I liked it the other day when someone said, "Was it you or was it Fonzo who said I don't even consider it a sport?"
That was harsh.
It's dropped so low here in Australia that you have to be there to understand just how.
Yeah. No, I chuckled at that. But no, it's a huge sport here, and we're definitely a minority, certainly in this area, let alone in the country. So Yeah, we get to a certain point, and the rugby union season is getting slightly longer. It seems every year because they've added this cup postseason now, so it takes longer for us to get our players into any kind of preseason. Like we haven't done a proper what you'd consider to be a proper preseason ever, because we just trust that the guys are coming over fit, even though they're broken. They've got a certain level of game fitness. And then you get to July and they start their preseason, and we've got to, they all disappear from what we're doing. So it's just one of those things that I've just had to accept and try and work around. Can you just convince them to buy into the season and play for the season? And we've got a decent core of players who probably won't go and play rugby union. And that's just about enough to keep us sort of ticking over, or has been just about enough to keep us ticking over. But we've really tried to change things going into 2025, which we'll probably touch on later on. But yeah, the challenges are, I keep setting myself challenges and I need to stop. We came out of COVID and there was the RFL put out an initiative boosting women's rugby league. And I thought, oh, well, let's try that, So everyone at the club was like, well, we haven't got a women's team. We've got no female interest. And I was like, well, I'm going to apply anyway. So we applied anyway for this competition, the Super League South at the time. Got the gig, and it was like, right, I've got to find a team now. But it was packaged well enough by the RFL that it attracted players in. We picked up our initial crop of female players, and we've had a really solid core of women players ever since. And we've actually capped women players, like legitimately first team capped. We've had Storm Cobain played for Ireland. Kaz Colley played for England against Wales. We've got a couple of girls who are currently trying to break into the Welsh side. They're in their train-on squads, and that's been pretty exciting. And then, obviously, once that's up and running, I then thought, well, we haven't got enough going on, so let's try wheelchair. Because off the back of the World Cup, wheelchair exploded over here. Like the World Cup in 2022 was phenomenal. The BBC, the main broadcast channel over here in the UK, did such a good job of promoting that World Cup in the face of all the financial adversity that it was up against, and all the COVID adversity that it was up against, and the uncertainty that was going on. And they really put on a spectacle. And I was contacted by numerous people during the wheelchair games, oh, you guys are rugby league. Have you got a wheelchair team? Where are you from? And they were like 40 miles away.
And just interrupt, able-bodied players can play?
Yep. So you're allowed 2 non-disabled players on the pitch at any one time.
Okay.
Which is awesome because, we've had, and it definitely separates us from whatever rugby union pretends is their game, because let's face it, that's not rugby. It's like a version of netball in wheelchairs, right? It literally has nothing to do with rugby. But I don't even think that they pretend that it's got anything to do with rugby. It's just the players sort of call it rugby because they can't call it murder ball. So, our game is literally rugby league in a chair, and it's awesome because we've got a dad who trains with their able-bodied daughter. We've got a father and son who come down and play. What struck me was I'm sitting there and I'm watching these guys playing, and there's guys playing passionately for the badge, the club badge that I've created, and they've got no legs, which if we go back even 5 years is just inconceivable. And then they turn up on the sidelines for the running game, and then the running game players turn up and watch and cheer these guys on, and there's such a club feel that's building and growing. And we had our end of season do this year, and it was the first time it's the first time we've run a full season of wheelchair. So we had all these guys mashed together. We had the men's running game, the women's running game, the wheelchair guys. It was insane. And they're all just, intermingling, socializing, and they're all part of exactly the same club. They play for the same club and passionately play for the same club as well. So, while there are huge challenges to what we're trying to do, there's also massive reward.
You're definitely building some great things there. And speaking about the RFL and ambition for the club, Bedford missed out on inclusion in League One recently after the RFL went for Gould Vikings instead. How disappointing was that for you and the club? And do you see it as a missed opportunity for expansion?
We did, and a lot of hard work went into it. Like a lot of hard work went into it. It was disappointing. I was always of the opinion that 2025 was going to be a real challenge. You know, you look at what the NRL do when they're expanding, and they're like, right, okay, the Dolphins, you guys have got the gig, but you're coming in 2 years' time. So you've got 2 years to say, look, we've got a franchise. You can go out and find your extra investment, your sponsorships, your players, your support network. And the same with what they're doing now with the PNG thing. And they're not coming in for another 2 years. And then there'll be another team that's probably another year further down the line. I'm not saying that it was a poor decision from the RFL in terms of we need you in 25. They needed a team for 25. And that was always the remit. It was always going to be a stretch for us. I put in place what I could put in place. Our application was what I could do. I talked to as many people as I could to try and back us up and get us across the line. I don't begrudge the decision at all. I actually think it was the right decision. Having had the feedback, it was the right decision for 2025. We wouldn't have been ready. Gaul Vikings, so they're placed. They kind of came out of nowhere, but there was a community club there, but then this professional club is actually backed up by a lot of people with a lot of experience. You know, they've got former executives from Super League working there. They've got former Super League players as coaches. They've got former Super League players signed on. You know, they'll be good. They'll do well, and they're placed in an area that's, you know, it's ripe for. They can just pick up rugby league players because they live everywhere.
It is, but it's like adding a 10th team in Sydney, in my mind.
Yes, it is. It is, but this is, you know, I think we would have been set up to fail if we got in 2025. This is my point. I'm just trying to be pragmatic about this. They had everything in place and we didn't. So from an RFL point of view, I don't begrudge them going with something that was there rather than something that was speculative. If it had been a 2-year process or a 3-year process, I'd probably be a bit more pissed off because we've got a population of, I think it's almost 5-6 times as many. They've got 19,000, 20,000 in Gaul, and Bedford's got a population of 185,000 people and growing. We're down the M1, so you've got the M62 runs straight across, the M1 straight down, the A1 runs parallel, and we're like smack in the middle of the M1 and the A1 down into London. So as an expansion area, I think we would have been ideal. You've got London, you're then starting to creep back up the M1. Population-wise, I think we would have been ideal. You know, we're just as big as a lot of the sides in Super League population-wise. And if you're looking for audiences, that's how you do it. You know, are Gaul ever going to be are they ever going to generate a huge fan base? I don't know. It'd be unfair of me to sit here and speculate, but they could. But not, you know, the potential isn't quite there as much as it is in Bedford. But look, we'll go again. We believe that we are a good spot for expansion. We've got a lot of really good things in place. We'll keep trying. If we got 2025, I think we would have been really, really under the pump. If we'd had a 2-year run in, I think we'd have been fine. But we didn't. So, you know, that's where we're at. I'm just trying to be, like I said, I'm just trying to be pragmatic about that decision.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic answer. And my next question, I won't be quite as blunt as Fonzie has been about the English game, but things have looked pretty grim, particularly on the financial side for rugby league in the UK in recent times. This is obviously despite IMG's intervention. What do you think, if anything, can be done to restore the sport's standing?
I don't know. It's one of those things where I've just watched the decline of a sport over probably the past 20 years. I don't know what the answer is. International, actually. It's
I agree.
Probably, it's where I always come back to when I start, you know, reflecting on this is when I first got into the sport, I've grown up with rugby union, right? The Six Nations is unquestionably February, March every single year. It's in the calendar. It's in the calendar for the next 20 years, right? You've got your autumn internationals. You've got the Lions tour every 4 years. They've got a product, an international product that just works. And people, I don't want to say people blindly follow it, but it's there and it's established. So people It's just part of their annual calendar. It's part of their psyche. It's not like this guesswork that we've got going on. We don't know. We don't even know if the tour is definitely the Kangaroos tour is definitely in this country next year. It's sort of, it might be in this country, but we haven't got stadiums locked in. We don't know what the Kiwis are doing. We don't know what France are doing. We don't know what anyone's doing. There's nothing. We don't even know where the next World Cup is after Australia and PNG. You know, it's ridiculous. I pull my hair out, but there's this. You know, I can't do anything. I'd love to be able to do stuff. You know,
And for those listeners, Rob has beautiful hair, I might say.
Over time, I've put proposals forward for European competitions and other things, and they've just been overlooked. I haven't even had feedback from them, and I think it would be a really easy win. Just put competition in place. You know, I think you guys touched it last week. We play 30 games in this country. Like, it's an obscenely long season. The NFL has 16 games, 17 games, and then the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
It's a dead short season, but it's massive. The NRL plays 23 games, 22 games, and then playoffs.
There's 27 rounds, but 3 buys, but that is going to be reduced. So they do play 24 games, but I can't see it lasting after the next TV deal.
Yeah, I mean, the international game is where we need to hang the hat and where we really need to focus. But who's going to be brave enough to do that when the clubs own the game?
Yeah, and
clubs aren't going to vote for that.
It's not just the UK, Rob. I mean, even in Australia, where everyone says, "Oh, you know, the NRL is fantastic. They're really well organised and stuff." The announcement of the Pacific Championships and what was happening on that happened very, very late in the season, and people were saying, "Well, how can I plan to, you know, a trip over to Fiji? I might want to go and watch it in a game in Fiji or New Zealand or thing," because, you know, again, it's just a last minute, you know, second thought. Oh, the season's finished now. We can sort of think about the international.
So if we look at
the
growth, the growth of the Pacific Championships has been slow and steady over the past few years. It's like there is definitely going to be something. I agree. You need to know now what's happening next year. You need to know now what's happening in 2 years. But it has grown steadily, and there's, you know, I remember watching a game a couple of years ago, it was Samoa v Fiji or something. They're playing in a smaller stadium with a chain link fence around the outside. And now they're playing, you know, they've upscaled those stadiums and they're getting bigger gates and the TV production is better. And I think it was just a case of small steps. Does it work? Yes, it does. Okay, incremental growth, until you've got what you've had this year, which is a 2-tier competition with a promotion relegation style system or opportunity. And it looks good. And Australia have bought into it. And Australia are there. You know, there was such a long time where it's like, well, you know, Australia don't need to take part in this competition because we're just going to wipe the floor with everyone. And you know, England / Great Britain haven't beaten the Aussies since 96 or whatever it is, just an obscene amount of time. So there's this argument where it's like, well, what's the point in us playing them because we won't beat them? Well, the point in playing them is you're putting on a spectacle, you're putting on a product. You know, just because you don't know or because you think you know the outcome of a game, does that mean you don't play it? Otherwise, you just wouldn't have sport, would you?
Actually, I'm of the belief that the tour next year, it would not surprise me if England, I know Fonzie's got a very different view with these 60-0 score lines and things like that. I wouldn't surprise me if England beat Australia in England.
Yeah, potentially.
I think England is in a lot of ways on the improve, and obviously a lot of more and more players are coming out to play in the NRL. I think Australia, in some ways, because of the player pool, their player pool's getting smaller. They're actually on the declines
because of the rise of the Pacific Island.
NRL, you got I think it's 53% or something like that thrown around. These days, you know, they're encouraged and want to play for their heritage team. So there's less and less.
That's really helping.
Players coming through.
Yeah, how refreshing was it? I mean, obviously you're Aussies, but how refreshing was it to see New Zealand win that comp last year?
Yeah.
Yep.
it's good for international rugby league. You don't want one team being totally dominant.
No,
and
I don't think there'll be 60-0 scores next.
they
year.
won't. They won't.
I think there'll be competitive games. There might be a couple where it's 60 minutes and then the fitness will start to tell. But there are some really fucking good players over here. Sean Wayne is a good coach. He's clearly a good coach. He's won a lot of stuff in the game. He's driven a lot of standards in the sport, and people buy into him as a coach.
Yeah.
The World Cup in 2017, arguably 6-0.
Yeah.
And arguably the difference was the ankle tap on Watkins.
Yep,
I agree.
Absolutely.
But I don't think we are a million miles away. I think we need to be playing a lot more consistently. But yeah, going back to what would help the sport in this country is simply international. And I think you said on the last podcast, where would you inject money into the Northern Hemisphere? Would you do it into Super League? I don't think you would. I think if you're going to do it, inject it into France. There's a lot of potential in France. There's a lot of very passionate clubs in France who are putting money in their own money because there's no broadcast deal.
Yeah,
and they're supporting semi-professional rugby, which is a good standard. There's good players over there. And if there was money put into their whatever their new rebranded, is it Super 13s or something? Their new competition, that elevates them, and an elevated France then means that England have got competition because England don't have competition over here. That's a 40-0 game against France every time. We stopped playing Wales because there's no Welsh Super League players, or very few. So the standard of the Welsh side is championship level at best, which is a shame. And I'd like them to be better. Again, I go back to earlier on when I said when I grew up in rugby union where it's the international game is just entrenched. I don't know any club players, but I know rugby union international players.
Yeah.
But I went over and I was sort of like, right, where's the international stuff? I was like, oh, okay, that was weird. And then I saw, nothing happened. Following year, they announced the European Cup, and I was like, oh, cool, excellent, right, International Rugby League. And I was waiting for it, and there was nothing on TV, and I had to find highlights. That was the only way I could watch it. And at the time, there's a player called Gareth Thomas who'd come over from Welsh Rugby Union, huge name in global rugby, and he was playing for Wales. And it was we just made nothing of it. We almost as a sport wanted to laugh at him whenever he failed. I'm not saying that we need to treat him as a god because he's come from rugby union, but we do need to recognise his credential, and we do need to sort of say, look, we as a sport have attracted this guy over. And if we'd done that, I think you'd then get 2 or 3 more guys going, rugby league is actually a welcoming environment. We can go and give it a shot over there. But nobody does. And it all comes down to money again. Like I think you said in the last podcast, there's no money over here compared to rugby union. So why would a player come over other than the passion that you get from somebody like Ronan Michael? If you can find 24 Ronan Michaels in Scotland, in Ireland, in Wales, you can build something off them.
Yeah, he's a very passionate guy.
Hey, he's full of energy.
Yeah, Rob, I'm just going to take you back to Bedford again quickly.
Yep.
Following your social media quite a bit, you've publicly said the club will take a different approach next season as you steer the organisation towards professionalism.
Yep.
Tell us about that, and do you still hold out hopes, which I think I know the answer to this, but do you still hold out hopes for a League One spot?
Yeah, of course we do. It was the aspiration. We sort of said it was part of our 5-year plan 5 years ago. We always said let's be aspirational, because there's no point in sitting here just being. Well, I mean there's always a point in community clubs, but me personally, I've got a passion for the sport. I would like to work in professional sport. I just live 2 hours from anywhere that's professional rugby league. Down into London, it's 60 miles to get to London Broncos. It takes me 2 hours. So it's just hard work trying to crack into an industry that is so far away. And I can't. It's also difficult for me to just cut my ties here because I've got a very stable job. So if I was to do that and then leave, it's a huge risk. So I just sort of said, well, if I can't if I can't go to it, I'm going to bring it to me. I'm just going to build it here. So, yeah, the aspiration is still to do it. We've obviously got to wait for an opportunity to come up. There is talk of opening up promotion and relegation from conference into League One. I don't know how that's going to work, but that'll be a couple of years down the line if it does happen. But yeah, so we just going through this process, it opened my eyes to how far off professional or even semi-professional we actually are. And I don't mean that as in like there's a huge gulf. There's just, I know what we're not doing. So next year and the year after is going to be, well, let's put these things in place. You know, let's start creating a game, a match day experience. Let's start building a crowd. Let's start looking at bringing players in who have been on pathways. Let's start seeing if we can recruit decent standard players in. Can we house them? Can we give them jobs? Can we look after them? Rather than just like picking from the area that's around us, which, you know, with all due respect, disappears in July when they go back to rugby union training. Let's try and find rugby league players and bring them to the town. You know, I've reached out. I've had a few conversations with Aussie lads about coming over because there are so many guys come over and play in London for the London clubs, and those 3 London clubs are top 3 every single year because they've got an Antipodean presence.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's clearly an easy win. That's a top-down win for us. We'll get juniors and we'll build juniors up, bottom up. But to be successful this year, next year, let's try and raise standards and do a top-down as well. So, and then kind of just meet in the middle over the next few years. So, you know, we're talking with a few Aussie boys, and you know, the thing is that if anybody comes over to England, where are they going to move to? Right? It's London.
London.
And we're 40 minutes out from central London on the train.
All right.
We're 20 minutes away from Luton Airport, where you can get to Europe in an hour and a half.
Yep.
You know, you can get to most European cities in between an hour and 3 hours. You know, we think we've got, and we're half the price to live here because we're not actually London. But where do you come if you're Australian? You've only ever heard of London or Manchester maybe, so you just go to London. So we're just trying to, you know, say, look, there is another opportunity in the UK. You can live here, direct link into central London. There's some places in London where you can't get to central London in 40 minutes. So, you know, but it's the same. You know, if I was going to Australia, I'm going to land in Sydney or Brisbane.
Yeah.
I'm not going to land in the town that's 40 minutes, just 40 minutes out. You know, so it's just about let's try and create some awareness with lads and get them over and, you know, say this is a rugby league destination that you can come to and you can have a rugby league experience in the UK, and we can start to build a community of Australians over here, and hopefully that will snowball as well, and then that just adds another feather to the bow of what we're trying to do over here. I'm not saying we're just going to become an Australian side,
yeah,
but let's bring them over because they'll raise the standards as well. Because this isn't a rugby league heartland, so if we're bringing lads over, the UK lads have then got other guys that they can raise their standards to play against and play alongside, and you know that's just something that we're trying to sort of dabble with this year and see if we can pull that off.
Yeah,
I do hope you'd be interested, lads. Do come over because the 2 or 3 that I've talked to have been really sound boys. You know, they want to come over for an experience. They're good lads. I think they'd really enhance what we're trying to do. And yeah, and then there's, you know, there's a corporate side to things as well. You know, can we build a business network? Can we do pre-game hospitality? Can we, you know, just put a meal on? Can we re-engage with our old boys network? Can we get them down? Can we do memberships? Can we, you know, what does a membership look like? Is it discount off the bar? Is it discount off stash? Is it XYZ? We've got the local rugby union junior club with 600 kids. Like, how do we not take advantage of that, but how do we engage with that? So we're looking at, we've got 7 home games in the new year, and we're looking at doing 7 summer skills camps. For us to run junior teams is hard work because there's not a lot of junior teams around us, and we've tried in the past, and it is really hard work. And then you've got all the, you know, the safeguarding stuff that you need to think about and be concerned about, and travel, and how do you get players to places, and all these things that sort of come out the woodwork when you're starting to try and do stuff, and they're all things that detract from what you're trying to do. So next year, if we can engage with every single age group at that junior club and then fill it up again with the other junior rugby union clubs that are around us, can we generate 500 kids who come down on a Saturday morning and they do summer skills camp with us? And it benefits them because it keeps their squads together, and we can engage with their coaches and we can engage with their first aiders and safeguarding and X, Y, and Z. And then the idea is that their sessions will finish just before our men's team kick off. So then you've got a crowd because they'll stick around, and you put a burger van down there and you sell chips and ice creams and whatever else. And all of a sudden you've then got a game experience. You've got a match day experience. You've got a crowd who's there. You're generating revenue. You've got stash sales, and you've got 500 kids running around in Bedford Tigers tops. It's stuff that small ideas that just need a little bit of work and a little bit of effort in the right areas. And I've always sort of thought you're only hampered and restricted by your imagination. Like if you can think it, you can do it. So, and I've probably to my detriment, I just got ideas.
I absolutely love it.
And then I just try to capitalize on them rather than just being cautious and saying, maybe that's a stretch too far. I go, that's an idea. Let's do it. It's like, how do we do it? It's not should we do it? It's how do we do it?
Yeah. And if you were super cautious, you wouldn't have moved beyond just a men's competition, which is a perfect segue to my next question, which is how important has it been for the club to develop women's and wheelchair teams? And do you have plans for youth teams in the future? We've obviously already touched on that a little bit.
It's super important because for me, it's a club. It's not just a team; it's a club. Can we build something that sits at the heart of a community and reaches out past the local community into the slightly wider community and brings more people in? There's the philanthropy in that. Look what I built. Look what we've got. We've got, like I said about the end of season, men's, women's, wheelchair guys all mingling together and creating a community here and building new friendships. But then there's also, that comes with a value when we're approaching sponsorships or investment. This is what your money is going towards. This is what your money is driving. We don't make a lot of money as a club because we're just a community club at the minute, but it's there and it attracts that, and people are interested now because we're not just can you come and sponsor our club? It's got one men's team. It's now, can you sponsor our club? Does your branding want to be associated with disability sport, with women's sport, with an aspirational men's team, with juniors? So we're just trying to think about the wider effect of branding and marketing, just that little bit more so than we have done in the past. So,
sorry to interrupt. That's almost, or it's very, very similar to the answer that Jason from Hong Kong Rugby League gave us, Stu, which is the commercial appeal of also having women's teams involved helped them tremendously.
I actually know Jason. Jason was he's obviously from Hong Kong, but he played for one of the teams that's like 17 miles away from us.
Yeah, he went to university.
So he used to play against us a couple of times. So it was when I heard him on the podcast, I was like, oh no way, it's Jason. So I reached out to him off the back of it. So
good.
Yeah, that's
good.
Cool.
We're helping the International Rugby League community.
Rugby League International, yeah. And then moving on to juniors. Yeah, we've got aspirations for junior setups, but we think year one is let's just do skills camps. Let's get that volume of players associated with the club and familiar with the club, and we won't. It doesn't even need to be rugby league skills camps. It can just be rugby skills camps this summer, and then we can build on that if there's interest. We'll do feedback at the end. Do you want to play games? Do you want to be more competitive? And we can push for games after that. But like I said, the local sides, there's not a lot around us, so it would be difficult. We'd be travelling into London. We'd be travelling over an hour and a half to get to some games. So it presents challenges for a very thinly resourced club. So we're just trying to expand at the right pace, I think.
Rob, I just want to take you away from Bedford for a little while. You have another role as head coach at Cambridge University Rugby League, which we've talked about before. Again, It's not the first place you would look when talking about our sport of rugby league. Just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I got involved in that 2017. One of my mates had coached them in the early 2010s, and I'd gone over a couple of times to a couple of sessions and helped out a few times. And I've been to the varsity match with Oxford, and it was a real event. They did it in the centre of London, and there was a lot of prestige around it. There's a dinner and lots of rich people. And then I got involved in refereeing, and because of my shift pattern, I could referee the student game on a Wednesday. So my closest club is Cambridge. So I was refereeing over at Cambridge almost every week. Their current coach, or their former coach in 2017, left. And obviously I know a few of the boys, and they reached out and said, look, would you consider coming over? And I was like, okay, well, let's have a little look. So I got on Wikipedia, and it's established. It's been going for 40 years. The varsity match has been played between Oxford and Cambridge every year for 40 years. So there's a real history there. So I got onto Wikipedia and I was looking at the previous results. And it was like 8 years where the result was getting worse and worse and worse in favour of Cambridge, to the tune of about 70 points to 0 the previous year. And I thought, fucking hell, right, okay, I've got my work cut out here. So I went over to this first training session. I know it was a game. I went over for a game, and I was just said, I'll just come and watch. And they had 12 lads, and very few of them looked athletic. And their warm-up was essentially toe punting a rugby ball into a bush. I thought, oh, fucking hell. I was like, right, look, what do you guys want to get out of this season? They're like, we want to win varsity. And I was like, okay, I'll set the goals. So I took it on, and I just thought, look, realistically, we're not going to win this. But it was something. It was a new involvement in the sport. It was something to just reinvigorate me at quite a difficult time, because my mum at the time was unwell. I was dealing with that in my personal life, and we'd had a death in the family as well. So it was a pretty naff year, 2017, and it was just something different to just exercise my brain in a different way and a bit of escapism. So I went over there and I started, I was like, right, what do you guys do? How do you organize yourselves? And they were like, well, we just get through the season, and when it comes to varsity, we just find all of our union mates and bring them in. And I was like, well, that's got to change. Like that's not a culture. So I was like, set up a WhatsApp group, get everybody in this WhatsApp group, and you're all going on the piss tonight. We'll play the game. You guys are going on the piss. And they're like, well, okay, but I was going to go out with my mates. I was like, well, no, these are your mates, right? So build a culture. And over the next sort of few weeks, I'm not going out with them. I'm sat in this WhatsApp group, and Wednesday comes along, and there's 6 boys going out, and the following Wednesday it's like 8 boys are going out, then there's 12 boys going out, then there's 20 boys going out, and all of a sudden training numbers are going up, and the social scene's building, and the bond between them is building. I can't do recruitment over there because I don't know the students, so that was all led by them, but it was just, all it needed was a little culture tweak.
Yeah.
And the captains that I've worked with over the past couple of years, like the early guys, they knew they weren't going to get a win. They knew they weren't going to be the captain that was going to break this long losing streak. But they bought into the concept, and they, success for us is being slightly better than last year. And since then, we've won the league 3 or 4 times. We've had really good cup runs. We won the varsity match in 21 and 23. So the one in 21 was after, I think it was a 12-year losing streak. So we finally cracked it. But it was good for Oxford because they were getting nothing out of it. There's nothing. They were turning up, putting 50, 60 points on a team, get a trophy, go on the biz. But now it's a competitive game. The results over the past 4 years, I think that it's been 8 points, 6 points, 4 points, 2 points, the difference. So it's a really close game. It's a really tight game. And that becomes a spectacle. And that means that more people then come to watch. And you don't know what the result's going to be. And the crowd, the crowd is pretty ferocious.
I love that.
It's a real partisan crowd. So yeah, it was just, and I've met some really good people through that. There's one of the alumni from Cambridge, one of the old boys was a guy called John Minards, who was the owner at Wakefield. in the Super League at the time. So I got connected with him, and he was brilliant. He's like, come and do a week with us. Come and sit and work with the coaching staff and just watch and learn. And the coaching staff were brilliant. I walked in, every single person when I walked in, and I was Joe Nobody. I was just walking into this environment, this professional environment. And as I walked in, every single person stood up and shook my hand.
True. Yeah.
And that really stuck with me, because none of them had to do that. I was just some guy who was there to watch and observe. But every single person I saw, from players to management to support staff, dead friendly, dead good. There was actually a glimmer of an opportunity to work with him up there, but then he sold the club. So that's fair. I think he's now really enjoying his retirement. But yeah, I'm eternally grateful for everything that John's done for me in the sport, because he managed to open doors for me that wouldn't have been opened otherwise. I don't know if he created a monster by showing me the professional environment, sort of spurring that dream on. But
yeah, I absolutely love that. And Stu compiled these questions that are like, each one adds to your workload. This one's like, wow, this guy does so much for rugby league. So the next question is, just to add to your workload, you've recently taken on the role of developing the women's game in Scotland and putting a national team together. How did that come about, and what are the plans?
So it came about, basically, if we just go back to that conversation about, there's no international sport, there's no international rugby league. I want to do something to grow the game, and I've been putting proposals out left, right, and centre, and nobody's picking anything up. And I thought, is there a way in? And obviously, I got to know Stu really well over the past couple of years, watching the work he's been doing there, and our girls have been getting into international programs. I think the women's area is a really good growth area for the sport. It's a really achievable growth area for the sport, and Scotland don't have a women's side. Simple as that.
Surprising.
So I just sort of I reached out to these organisations aren't well funded. They're pretty much volunteer based. They're almost identical to clubs. In fact, I'd probably say that some clubs are probably better resourced than, I'm talking about community clubs, are better resourced than some of these national governing bodies. So yeah, I just reached out to them and said, look, there's a gap in the market here. I've got 3 players at Bedford alone who, because I know, the ability that Storm's got, I know the ability that Kaz has got, I know the ability that Chloe and Ash had over in Wales. I know that the 3 girls that I've got who are Scottish can play international rugby league, but there isn't anything. So I just said, look, I've got 3 girls. They're definitely of the standard. They definitely cope. We can build something around them. What can I do to help? And then it was this sort of slow conversation, and it sort of ticked over time. And then I reached out to London Broncos, and Colin down there was great. And he said, look, I've got 3 or 4 girls as well. Then I reached out to the other teams in our comp. Have you got any Scottish girls, even if it's heritage? Yeah, I've got 1. I've got 2, whatever. So I basically said, look, I've got a squad. There's enough for a squad right now without doing anything. So I've been patched together with a guy who lives up in Cumbria, because he's been banging the same drum. So they basically just put us 2 together, and we're going to sort of tag team this project. He's going to run some trials in the north and on the borders of Scotland. I'll do something in the south and towards the M62, and we'll just, see what we can create, because there's going to be, international sport is aspirational. There's going to be people who will come to these trials because they want to play international sport. They see a window there where there isn't a window of opportunity in rugby union.
Yep.
Because the pathways just don't exist yet. So you're literally starting from square one. Get involved on day one, and we can build something. The talent is there, because there's enough talent with either Scottish born or Scottish heritage to compete at that level. Certainly with your Serbias, your Greece, your Netherlands, and then we sort of move to the next sort of grade of Ireland and then Wales. There's enough games around us that we can put on some tangible international activity. And I dare say we'd probably have a bit of success quite early on if we pitch it right. So yeah, that's how that came about. It was literally just bang the drum, knock on the door long enough, provide the evidence that, and the homework, and say, look, you guys don't have to do a lot. You just have to say yes, and I'll do the rest. And they've done that now, so we can kick on and we can progress.
Along the same lines, and we've talked about this earlier, but you've been an advocate of planned and regular international activity in Europe for some time. Do you think more can be done there? Particularly talking about the federations, the ERL, IRL, and all that. It just seems like there's more opportunity there, which is something you've pursued or tried to pursue.
I see where I'd like the sport to be. I don't want to question why. I don't want to question the guys who are currently there as to why we're not where I see the game should be. But the game hasn't grown internationally in 14 years. It certainly hasn't. I mean, I guess you could argue it has, but it certainly hasn't grown at a pace that I would think is possible.
At least not in the north. It's regressed in the northern hemisphere. I think we can all agree upon that.
Yeah, but there are, there is activity. There's activity in Serbia. They're very active as a nation. I heard somewhere that rugby league is actually more dominant than rugby union in Serbia. I don't know how true that is, but
I think it's pretty.
What a win! What a win! Like, build on that. But it's so much. Rugby league is so much more accessible as a rule book. If you can you imagine taking rugby union and going out to people who've never played it before and go, "This is rugby," and fuck all these rules.
Yeah.
Whereas
even rugby
league,
fans don't know what they are.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I've played the game, played both games, and I've played, and I'm still confused. I watch an international, I'm still confused about what the referee is actually doing most of the time.
Yeah, the referee's confused too.
I can't understand how our game hasn't caught on quicker and easier, because it's so much easier to understand as a base level of rules. It's so much easier to understand. But that's where we're at. We certainly haven't pushed it as a sport. If it was me, I'd have just said, look, we just need to create an international competition. However that looks in year one, that's how it looks in year one.
Yep.
We don't have to be a polished article straight off the bat, but we build. I go back to the Pacific Nations tournaments that you guys have got. 2 international sides playing in a park with a chain link fence 2 years ago, and now playing in stadiums with branding everywhere, and it's on TV, and I can watch it in the UK. I'm not having to watch it on a YouTube stream. That's tangible growth. It wasn't polished 2 years ago. It's polished now, and it will only start to get better and commercially more viable. So, can you structure something around wheelchair and women where the clubs aren't so dominant? So can we create those competition structures in wheelchair and women's sport, which you then say, look, these competition structures work. Can we now start to apply it to the men's as well, and just round off these competitions that we've got? How good would it be, Stu, to have 2-tier of European women's competition where you've got England, France, and Wales, for example, over here,
yep,
are probably the top 3, aren't they?
Yep.
Then you could have Ireland, Scotland, Netherlands as a western pool of Europe, and then Greece, Serbia. Say another one, Turkey.
Yeah,
Italy. Italy.
Yep.
Italy.
Yep.
So as a Euro B, 2 pools of Euro B, and then have a little playoff, and then in time you can start to expand Euro A, and you can do the same with wheelchair. Like if you just create a structure, things can fit into the structure. Whereas at the minute it's like everyone's just juggling their own juggling balls. I don't know. It just needs stability and structure.
Yeah, I agree. And sticking to sort of, because you've got such an entrepreneurial and so I guess bigger picture mindset, very, very keen to hear your thoughts on this question. The Men's World Cup for 2025 has been reduced to 10 teams for financial reasons. Is this the correct approach?
I get it. I would like to see the continuation of 16 teams, but if the money's not there, the money's not there. What they could have done, instead of saying the World Cup is 10 teams, is like we can have it as you can have as many as you want, but just have it, instead of having qualifiers, have your group stages are played regionally, and then your finals are played in a country. So your 10 teams becomes your finals. But you have your Northern Hemisphere group and your Southern Hemisphere group, or whatever it is, however you structure it. but you can have more teams playing under a World Cup banner, under World Cup branding, World Cup commercials, World Cup broadcasting, but they don't have to all travel because the financial burden on travel is extreme. So, who can we take as an example? Let's just say Ireland, who they're not going to be in that World Cup, are they? It's far more financially viable for them to play their World Cup games over here, just flying to Wales or playing in Wales, then playing in Scotland, and maybe playing in France. But those are World Cup games. They're just held here. And then if you get through to the next stage, that's when you fly off to Oz to play your final rounds. Yeah, so I think you can have a World Cup that's broader than 10 teams if you market it right and you structure it right. Just don't call them qualifiers. Have them as, these are World Cup matches. Your first round is regional rather than as part of the overall big festival that happens for your knockout stage or your final group stage.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Definitely.
Yep. No, it's a very pragmatic approach, I think.
But and the other thing there is you can then, players are then saying, I'm playing in a World Cup, and they can legitimately say, I'm playing in a World Cup.
Yeah.
Not I'm playing in World Cup qualifiers. We've made the group stage, we're playing in a World Cup. And you have the World Cup branded balls, and you have the World Cup branding in the stadium and whatever else. It doesn't have to be a full color scheme, but low key you can have that branding. If you're playing with LED screens around the pitches, like have the branding on that, so it's you're building it properly. Your match day programs can all be within that World Cup branding. I don't know. Spitballing ideas as I tend to do when I'm in.
I love it.
No, there's certainly some good ideas. And we've come to that stage, Rob, where I'm going to ask you the food question, Stu's food question. Now, I know you're a man of the world because you went to university in Sheffield, so you've been all right.
I've been about.
Does that make you a man of the world?
The last time Rob and I spoke in person was in a breakfast room of a hotel in Sheffield.
It was.
Favorite cuisine and favorite dish?
So interestingly, my dad is Kenyan.
No,
he was born and raised. Yeah, he was born and raised over in Kenya. So I can legitimately play international rugby league for Kenya.
You sure?
Which is something I have explored, but they haven't played any games for a couple of years. So that's also a very, very expensive game. But yeah, so my dad was born and raised in Kenya, and in 2018, so he left Kenya when he was, I think the last time he was there he was 21, 22.
Mm-hmm.
So he moved over to the UK and he went to school here and he played rugby and he settled in Bedford and met my mum, and he never went back. And then he took mum out there in 2017 and they had a great holiday out there, and we'd always holidayed over in France. So Dad said the best thing about that was how much mum loved Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
So we I touched on mum was ill in the latter stage of 2017 and we lost her just before Christmas. But he then took me, my brother and my sister out in 2018 and we did the identical holiday that they'd had the previous year. So that was a really nice family touch. But just before we get onto the food, the weirdest thing or experience with that was we landed at Nairobi airport and we got off and we're walking through the airport and you're stopping at passport and customs and whatever. And this man that I've known for 36 years started talking a language I've never heard.
Wow. Swahili?
And I was like, yeah. And I was like, of course he knows Swahili.
Yeah,
he grew up here. Like, why would I not think he knows Swahili? But I'd never heard Swahili other than, a couple of words on The Lion King. But
yeah, I was going to say, Hakuna Matata.
Yeah, exactly. So he's just like conversing with this guy, and me and my brother are looking at each other going, what the fuck is that? Like, this is weird. Anyway, yeah, touching on food, I didn't know, Kenya would be particularly renowned for its gastro, but the food out there was unbelievable.
Okay.
It was so good. I don't know if it was because we're in decent hotels and resorts, but the food out there was sublime. So yeah, if you ever get to go to Kenya, try the food.
Nice. Okay.
A very.
I bet you haven't had that one
answer.
yet.
Yeah, no, we have.
Kenya has not come up yet.
There we go.
Well, we're actually all out of questions, Rob. Have you got any final thoughts you want to circulate?
No, man, that's been a good experience getting on and chatting with you guys and just sort of being a part of what you guys are doing as well. Because I think your podcast's really good. I listen to a lot of podcasts and I always sort of start with you guys and then just let Spotify tell me what else I'm listening to after you guys are finished. So, no, it's been really good. It's nice to catch up with you again, Stu, and have a chat. And I know that we message every now and again, but yeah, good to have a proper catch up. So thanks, guys.
Yeah, and thanks for listening to us as well. But more importantly, thanks for coming on as well. I'll always end with you, Stu. Have you got any final thoughts?
My only thoughts are it's really good to see someone that's so motivated and positive about rugby league as you are, Rob. Bedford Tigers, I mean, if I was over there in England, it'd be the sort of club you just love to be involved with all that's going on and the ambition and just all that sort of stuff. It's just really exciting. So it's been really good to hear about again. I've talked about it before, but it's great to hear what's going on currently. So yeah, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Letting us know about all that.
Yeah, can I just sneak in a quick push? So if anyone's listening, just give us a follow on the socials.
Yeah,
helps our IMG score for when we go professional.
How do we do that?
Just search us. We're there.
Bedford
Instagram,
Tigers,
Facebook. Bedford Tigers, yeah, we're there. Front and center.
Absolutely. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Rob. Thank you so much for coming on. It means a lot to us, and hopefully our listeners really enjoyed this.
Yeah, cheers, boys. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Everything Rugby League. If you like this episode, give the show a follow and leave a review. For more news and insights, follow us on Facebook or head to everythingrugbyleague.com.